Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about user stories. So let's get into it. So the question in question was basically, Frederick, I know that you have said that doing MVPs can be bad because it lacks vision, but can user stories, which is an agile practice usually, be used even though you're not doing agile development? So the short answer is number one, I have never, ever said that MVP is a bad thing because it's not. I've said that it has a potential to be a bad thing because if you misuse it, you will lack vision. And when it comes to user stories, absolutely. I would say that you need a user story or at least a business case or similar sort of constructs in order to do anything successful within IT. Let me explain why. So when we're talking about a user story, the way that I define a user story is that you have a profile, an archetype of a person, like a type of user, if that makes sense. It can be different types of users. And they have a need that needs to be fulfilled, and we are trying to map out what their journey is going to look like through the system. Now, the cheap way of doing this is that you think yourself. You try to think, okay, I am a teenage girl and I'm going to use this product. My needs are this. I am this sort of person and I'm thinking this. I am a senior citizen and I am thinking that I'm going to do this with the system. How will I go about this? How will I act? You can just use your imagination if that makes sense. Now, in my experience, that works sort of. It's the right thing to do when you're at like a small scale because it's too expensive to do proper user testing. But if you can afford it in terms of time and monetary incentive, if you need to give your test users this as well, the best thing for you is to use real people, because the thing is that it's very easy to forget what type of users that you may have, and sometimes you don't even know. Depends on how much measuring you actually do. If you measure a lot and you have a good understanding of the users and what their profiles are, then you can use your imagination. But usually you always forget about something. My favorite one is that I always forget the senior citizen case. It's very easy for developers to forget about two things, which is people on low-end devices, like people who are using a really, really old phone or a really, really old tablet or something like that, and people who have different types of disabilities or people who are a little bit older and not so familiar with using digital products. These are very easy things to forget because most programmers are from their 20s up to their 40s or maybe say 50s, but like they're still in the digital age group where it's very common that it's almost a no-brainer that you know how to use certain things in products and stuff like that, right? So when you're making a user story, ideally you should actually base that user story on actual user feedback. You design the user story from the perspective of a person. You get to know some of your users and go and contact them, ask if because usually you always have a few strong adopters. You always have, within every group, whatever you're doing, it doesn't matter what it is, you will have people who are on the low spectrum, like they don't really care all that much. They're just kind of using your thing because it's just barely supports their use case. And then you have all the way up to people who absolutely love your thing that you do, like they are like religiously fanatic about the thing you do. I mean, shit, I have this going on this little channel of mine where I have some people who want to watch every single video and we talk and we have discussions and so forth. And then we have people who occasionally watch one or two things or like stuff like that. It's always a range everywhere. So using user stories, I think, is very vital, not only because it helps you develop your product, but also because it helps you develop good end-to-end tests, as an example. When you're using, and if you're doing end-to-end tests, it's not necessarily something you're doing, but if you are, it's very useful to have the same sort of considerations, because what you're basically trying to figure out is, okay, I have a group of common users or a focus group that I use in order to figure out how I'm going to direct my product roadmap. how are they using the system? Because this is something that some people this is a mistake, I've made it myself. You can't create a product that is right for absolutely everybody. You need to find your target group, and that target group should have a few profiles that you can use in order to map out, as I was saying, the next feature. Who are you going to interview if you want to figure out, or if you want to be data driven? And who are you going to simulate when you're simulating an end-to-end test, as an example. It helps a lot with your mindset around your product and testing when you have a user role, a user journey, or if you're using this sort of system right. Now, I want to say one thing as well, and that's this thing I was saying about MVPs. You don't think that MVPs are a bad thing and that you can only use user journeys in an MVP style of working, because even if you're doing waterfall, or if you're doing completely different things from, say, the standard agile scrum type of development processes, it's important for you to know your user, because if you don't, you're building software that you don't really know if somebody's gonna like. It's very important that you understand how the product is going to be used and how to develop it so that it fits the people that you're actually trying to sell it to. So what I want you to take away from this is that, number one, MVP does not mean that you're doing something in a bad fashion. It is just a style of developing software. It can work if you do it well, and it can be really bad for your project if you don't use it correctly. It's all about you. How do you use this? And secondly, it's important that I think that it's very important that you use user journeys just in general for your product development. In the beginning of things, and if you don't want to go through a lot of hassle of interviewing people live, it's absolutely fine to just have a rough understanding of the sort of age range and needs that you're dealing with when you're developing the system. And you can think about different types of personalities using your system. Now, if you don't have any of these metrics, the usual suspects are going to be tech-savvy person who knows how to use the system, person with special needs of some sort, elderly person who doesn't really know all that much about digital products. Those are usually very simple, juicy journeys that you can go through. And just use that as a driving force for developing your product roadmap, to validate and test features and things of this nature. And that's actually going to help you make a much better product than if you don't consider any of this. And it's very easy to forget about it. So if you can, live interviews with real people is a very, very good thing. And being data-driven is also a very good thing. Have a great day.